What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hollywood Already Did It, your weekly podcast about movies that have been adapted, remade, rebooted, sequelized, or otherwise unoriginal. I am your host, Blake Schultz, and with me is Terrence Tatum.
Hello, everyone.
And we're going to talk about a movie that I've been wanting for so long and am so disappointed by. This week's Scary Stories That Tell in the Dark came out. The adaptation of the beloved 3 books that are anthologies, I guess.
Yeah.
If for those of you who don't know, everybody knows, but the art in these books is what really is the standout, right?
Correct.
Like when you really boil down these books, they're pretty creepy to like just silliness.
Yeah.
Like the Viper who has come to wipe your windows.
Right.
But they all almost come from folklores from several different nationalities:
Morality
German,
plays.
Native
Yep.
American, Indian, Chinese, American, and are kind of reworked for the 80s.
Yeah,
when
the
came
first
out.
one was 81.
It feels like such a 90s property to
It
me
does.
because I was born in 1989.
And because I feel like a lot of libraries and schools and a lot of people were telling people to read those books because a decade had passed by the time that they released, that they were now become part of pop culture.
Yeah, they really got their way in.
Yeah.
To the point where they eventually had a controversy of whether or not they were appropriate for kids. Because these
Correct.
charcoal drawings by Stephen Gamble, I believe, because it was Brett Helquist who did the 2011 ones, and then they re-released them because people wanted the
artwork.
The fucked up stuff.
Yeah, I want the crazy shit.
Those images stayed with
They're nuts.
forever.
Yeah, correct.
Right? Like, it's crazy what those do. But, these are things that acknowledge Shakespeare, T.S. Eliot, Mark Twain. They're not the most original stories. A lot of them are like Campfire. The Headlights, which is one of my favorite ones, is a story that I feel like everybody's told in a different way of like, oh, the passenger was in the car, but they thought they were being followed because the guy kept flushing his head, but there was a killer in it.
I mean, it's happened in the movie Urban Legend did it in the movie. Like, these are basically urban legends or morals.
The one that's in this movie, My Dowdy Big Toe, whatever the nonsense is, has also been done 100 times across a lot of things. There's the one with the dog that turns out to be a rat that kind of shows up. But it's been adapted into a movie with Guillermo del Toro, which is really exciting. It's really exciting, and it's a shame that let's jump into this. What did you think of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark?
So I saw this today, and I sat in the theater for a good 5 minutes afterwards, just kind of disappointed. I was sitting there because
the idea of you just sitting in the dark sadly in a movie theater really makes me laugh.
I just sat there and the credits are rolling. I'm just like, what just happened?
Because see, when I'm disappointed, I get up like it's a bad roller coaster ride. I'm out the door before the lights are even on.
I'll sit there, especially if I'm disappointed and I thought there were bright spots in the movie, I'll just sit there because I'm just like, where did this go wrong? Because there's some things in this that work, and there's some things that are just so god awful bad that I'm like, this doesn't work. I think the horror elements of this, when we start dealing with the actual creatures, because that's already ingrained, we have those, we know what they look like, we just kind of made them now for this. They work well. When this movie fails for me is all the other stuff. When we're trying to do the stuff that ties these stories together, or make a through line for these stories. I kind of just like none of this stuff works. It becomes very Stranger Things light. I feel like we are unnecessarily racist for reasons. Like none of this stuff
it was
really.
The 60s, Terrence.
Yes.
Everyone was racist.
Everyone. We just threw that word out there left and right. I just don't know why this had to be set in that time frame, other than the fact that it was like, oh well, this is working for someone else, so I'm going to go do this for me.
Del Toro likes that time period. Is why
that's true.
Like that's
Not Stranger Things. Shape of Water is in that era as well. But I just think for me, the actual characters, the kids, are so bland and their stories are so unimportant to me that when I'm in is when every time we get the stories from the actual books, and then the second they end, my brain's like, well, we're back here with these dull ass kids.
Yeah, no, it felt like a show when you only like a few of the characters. Mm-hmm. It's like Game of Thrones. There were some storylines where I was like, I can get up and get popcorn now.
Go right.
Until we're back to Khaleesi, I don't care.
Right.
I don't really care about Bran and the Raven.
Yeah.
Which is why the ending of that show is trash.
Makes no sense. Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff. Not a lot. There's about 15% of this movie that I like.
Okay.
And I want to talk about the things it does well before I talk about the laundry list of things
it does not.
that irritate me.
Yeah.
Adapting these stories, they look like they're from the page. Great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
If I was a kid, and I don't even think I mean 13, I mean like 9 or 10, this would be a great
This is a gateway.
intro to this genre.
It's a gateway
This is
horror.
on some
It does.
Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Correct.
Erie, Indiana, Goosebumps type stuff. And I respect that. I think that's a good line to toe.
And it gets sometimes it's like right in between because when the scarecrow stabs him with the rake, I was like, oh.
Yeah, but that Goosebumps show had those moments
yes,
too.
That's true.
There was some stuff in there. So I like seeing a movie that kind of isn't afraid to scare kids. Because I feel like nowadays when we get into childish horror,
the teen horror,
I guess.
Yeah.
It is either like a child should not be watching The Nun.
Right.
Or it's
Goosebumps.
It's just talking down to you.
Correct.
So I think this did a good job of being accessible to kids and still having horror that works. And I guess entertaining for some adults. Like I never felt like I was being talked down to. It was never stupid. It was more just bad.
Correct.
I also do like, this Americana production design, 1969. There's some look and feel stuff that's very similar to It or Stranger Things.
The drive-through reminded me of like The Blob. Like I kind of dug that. Yeah.
I like seeing her in like the what do they call them? The old sock hop. I like.
Oh, I
seeing her
loved all the pink,
and the Get Up, and the Grease, and the Bye Bye Birdie.
Yeah.
That was fun. That really popped. So there's a lot of like color in the movie. The production design is good. The art direction is really good, which is usually how I feel about Del Toro movies. And there's other things that Del Toro does that I'm like, okay, we get it. Like he's really started to just hit you over the head with these like incredibly racist characters. And I get that that's important, and I get that racism exists. But unless you're going to kind of like challenge it, don't just show me that people are racist.
Yeah.
And so racist. Like, not just racist. These are, and he did this in Shape of Water too.
Yeah.
In the scene with the diner. We had to kick out the homosexual gentleman and then lose our minds back to back about the
black folks
people.
are here too?
Like, we needed to be reminded that this time was bad.
Yeah.
And a part of me is like, we get it. The 60s sucked unless you were white.
I think you could be a little bit more tactful how you deal with race. Like the character doesn't have to be outright, oh no, I'm going to start using these words consistently. Like you can say things where like, even if you try to have the Hispanic character try to touch him and he's like reels his hand back without saying words, you can be like, oh, that lets me know that this guy's not cool with people of a different race.
Right.
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I don't need to hear the word of one of the worst slurs that I can possibly have and then see it scenes later written on a car. I don't need this beaten over my head because it goes nowhere.
Right. And we never really resolve that character in a satisfying way.
Right.
And I get that like we as a country and as a time haven't solved racism in a pleasing satisfying way. So whatever. To me, it was just a little much.
It's on the nose.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's on the nose. But the other stuff I liked was the horror was always like a different brand of horror. It was kind of jump scary sometimes, and then it was really more like an It Follows type of dread. There was some body horror. We were never really stale in how we executed the scares. We kind of kept changing it up.
It wasn't always the same thing.
The issue with that is the pacing between the stories was just so much. And even kind of the rhythm of that got lost in what to me is a very generic and bland way to tie all these together and an unsatisfying ending.
We're
and
both book fans. And
blasé characters.
Yes, we're both fans of the book. And I know a lot of people's complaints when they first saw the trailers that they did not like the idea of a book being what tied all of these stories together. Like a book that's kind of self-writing itself. Right. How did you feel about that?
I hate it. The second I heard about that, I was out. And I liked when the movie opened and they had this big theme of stories are important, but stories can hurt and they can do this. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is the, I guess it's not a great one-to-one, but there's that Eminem song about like, how music and lyrics can be important, but they can also like go too far.
Right.
And I thought that was going to be a really interesting theme to explore, this kind of notion of storytelling and stories and what they can do. Can they inspire or can they hurt? And having the backdrop of horror for that narrative is really interesting. But they never do anything with that theme other than say that stories are hurtful.
Yeah.
Similarly, I guess light spoilers, they also say that, this book is reading us. Yeah. And it's a pretty traditional horror trope to go, karma happens.
Correct.
It's in Seven. It's in most horror movies.
Most horror movies have that.
Well, you did something
act
bad.
like a dick, you're going to have something dickish happen to you.
Sure, the Saw movies are usually like, hey, you did this thing, now cut a key out of his stomach because somehow that connects to you.
Because that seems like it equals.
So they kept saying that, and I, for the life of me, cannot figure out, outside of two of them, why these stories happen to these people. The two that make sense are the girl gets hit by spiders, and then she gets the spiders in her. And I'm like, fine.
And that one doesn't make that much sense because morality, she didn't do anything wrong, but it makes sense with what happened to her.
Visually. Right. Like that almost, and I almost, when that spiderweb hit her, because they showed you in the trailers the red dot and the spider leg, I was like, oh, is it actually going to be that this is all just in our heads? Right. Is that where the stories are going to be dangerous? Correct. Have we heard these stories
so much that I'm freaking out?
And now these kids are going to, it's going to be in their heads?
Yeah.
Because that would be fun.
Yeah.
No, we're not going to do anything inventive. We're just going to give you a bland story and then a cool adaptation of something you like.
Right.
And then go back to the bland story.
Yeah.
The other one that made sense is the Hispanic character who's like, oh, my brother was sent back in Vietnam in pieces, and then this monster is in pieces and just yelling that he's a coward.
Correct.
Which also kind of breaks the point of that story. What is it he says? Dowdy Toe.
Meatai Dowdy. I forgot what the... because it's the actual story.
It's called somewhere. Meatai Dowdy Walker.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I looked this up this morning specifically for this. What does that mean? And the writer of the story was like, it doesn't mean anything. The entire idea of this was that if you don't know what he's saying, if you can't see the monster, it's scarier. It's just going to give you anxiety. So in the original story, that's all this thing says. And there's a dog in one version of it that responds also with nonsense.
Okay.
And part of why those characters go crazy is they're just trying to figure out what they're saying.
So then when you say a word, an actual word that we understand...
Yeah, so then for this monster to just start yelling coward is like, well, then why did he say this nonsense when he fell down the chimney?
He clearly could speak fine before.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't make narrative sense or thematic sense.
Right. No, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that.
But then these other ones, the big toe story is like, why is this kid?
Why did that happen? Why does that happen to Augie, and why does that happen to the other friend gets sucked into the pale lady? Like neither of those kids did anything that would be considered to be kismically wrong.
Right.
So why are they getting their comeuppance? It's just a weird thing, and then they're gone. Like we don't ever see them again.
Are they? That's my other big problem with the movie. It feels like it kind of feels like the bottom shelf cereal of Stranger Things. Like the bully in the beginning who gets turned into a scarecrow.
Feels just like the bully from...
Well, he not only that, but he looks like the main character.
The actor,
He looks like he would have been in the same casting room with that guy.
Yeah, the guy who now in season 3 is in
an
ice cream spot.
Like, this one kid looks like Dusty. The tall, thin white kid looks like all the tall, thin white kids in this and it.
I think the only difference is we're leading with a lady here as opposed to leading with the guys
who kind of looks like Dusty's girlfriend in season 3.
That's true.
And then we're kind of doing the same notion of biking around. It almost had the same problem that the first It movie did, where you're like, guys, I get that this show is popular, and I get that we're all in the past and nostalgia, but we have to do some effort to differentiate these things visually. It can't always just look like the 80s, and especially if it's 1969.
Yeah.
And then we kept having this weird allusion to the Nixon election.
But that really went nowhere. Like the Nixon election was going through the background on both a black household and they showed it in the white cop. It was a big thing, but it never led to anything. It was just there to reiterate to us we're in the 60s.
Right. This same kind, and even motivations
with the draft dodging as well. That's part of that era as well.
Right. They kind of just kept reminding us where we were, but without doing much with that time.
Yeah.
And I think part of the issue is that these really good adaptations get bogged down by this story because about 80% of the movie is this story, and 20% of it is the scary stories.
Which is when it's good. And unfortunately, when you have a film and doing 20% of it being good and the rest not being it, that's not a good movie.
Especially when you're ending, some of this stuff doesn't even make sense. Like, we have the Red Dot story, and she gets carried off by the doctors.
Yeah.
And Dusty from Stranger Things
says she's dead.
Right. And then a cop says, oh, you didn't save her. She's going to be in the insane asylum forever.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the movie, she looks like she just fell on the playground and has a mild scratch on her
She's smiling.
face.
She's cool. She doesn't look crazy at all. There's no straitjacket. She's just driving in the backseat like, this is going to be a good trip. Where are we going?
And we've now decided that these people are alive and the secrets are in the book, but you've already talked to Sarah Bellow.
Right.
She didn't tell you that.
And she didn't release anybody. You think that when she stopped this, she would have released the people that didn't do anything wrong.
It's still her book. There's not going to be unless this tome is now going to be ancient and somebody else wrote in it before her.
Yeah. And we also, we talked about a little bit before, we got Ramon all of a sudden being allowed to go to the war makes no sense at all because he was around so many dead bodies.
Look, everyone hates him because he's not white.
Right.
So that alone.
Yeah.
I literally watched that movie and thought to myself, were we even allowing non-white people to serve in Vietnam? We were.
Yeah.
They didn't really care. They did, but for, whatever.
Right.
Whoever wants to shoot a gun can do it, I guess. Look at America today.
Correct.
And then, so the mechanic hates him, this kid hates him, this cop hates him. The cop is then violently murdered. All the other people just kind of disappear.
Correct.
Which also implies that these monsters aren't just doing the karma
to the one person.
She's just unleashing demons.
Correct.
Which was my kind of weird, all the other ones seemingly warped you somewhere else.
Their rules stopped making sense halfway during the film because the pale lady, we don't get a story written about that. Yeah.
Closed off this hospital into this red room.
Right.
Because then once that stops, doctors run in.
Right.
This maze he's in is gone.
Stops. Yeah.
But then when Dodie Toe shows up, it snaps the neck of a cop.
Correct.
Which I'm like, okay, so this kid who is already suspected for murder from the Scarecrow boy is now left his cell.
Yeah.
And there's a dead cop on the floor.
Yeah.
And your best answer is, sorry, we were ghost hunting, which is not going to work.
That's not going to do
We
it.
know that because it didn't earlier.
Right. And especially not as a Hispanic male in this time.
Right.
That's she might get off. You, not so much.
Right. If anything, he should have just been on the team with Dean Norris, and they should have just been we got to get the fuck out of Dodge.
Right.
It was just very frustrating. All of those aspects of the movie.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing. Like we said, I think if you're an 8, 9, 10-year-old kid, you can watch this movie and appreciate it. And even if you just started reading the books, that's about the time when you probably start reading the books. I think you would get something out of this. I think any older than that, this movie is going to fall flat.
And I think that's kind of the weird challenge with these movies is remembering that it's for kids. Mm-hmm. And I don't really have the ability to see through the eyes of a 13-year-old.
I can do, yeah.
But I think I stopped reading these books by the time I was in 7th grade. I was pretty young when I read them. So I feel like if you had showed this to me when I was 13, I was already watching Halloween, Aliens.
I feel like this book and the way that this book had a very small window for almost all kids. I think you have a 2-year run and then you're kind of out of it. And because depending on how your family raises you and whatever you do, you're already into I was into Child's Play before the second I was like, oh no, I don't need this is done. This is nothing to me. So yeah, you're right. How your learning curve changes how you accept these books. And I think this film, with crazy enough to say it, with a Child's Play that just came out, you no longer now you look at that and well, that's not that scary. Right.
And I think then this is where it gets interesting, right? When you look at the adaptation side of this.
Yeah.
Because it's very rare in any medium. You look at comic books, you look at most book adaptations, you look at almost anything with a visual. None of the MCU people are wearing their Steve Ditko costumes.
Not the OG costumes, no.
None of them are even close.
Our entire X-Men run, we've never seen an X-Men character in their costume.
So I feel like this is something we keep saying we want. Just give us what's off the page.
A one-to-one
page.
They
did that here, and I feel like we kind of lost something by doing that. Not with the stories themselves, but if we focused so much on the art that we kind of forgot why these stories mattered. And maybe with this series specifically, it is the art. You're remembering those terrifying charcoal paintings. Some of them you couldn't even hold. But the reality is these stories have a basis in urban legends and folklores.
They're morality plays, urban legend, folklores, and I feel like this entire movie, while we visually get to see all of these scenes, not one of them hit on what the folklore, urban legend, or moral is supposed to be about.
And to kind of set up your story to be like, we're going to talk about why stories are important, and then never tell us why any of these stories are important. Even Sarah Bella's story, because the big ending, spoilers, is I'm going to go tell your story.
Right.
I'm going to tell your story, and everyone's going to know the truth. And then she's like, I wrote Sarah's story.
No one believes me.
Most people didn't give a crap. So I was like, well, then stories aren't important.
No one gave a shit. Then why are we here?
Also, 3 kids are missing. What is this?
Yeah.
This world didn't need this book. It could have just been like a weird town where like stuff happens.
Like an Erie, Indiana style.
That would have been fine. And then you could have like woven these stories into the narrative rather seamlessly.
Yeah.
Because they don't all connect, but you could have opened with headlights. Somebody could have bought a dog that turned out to be a rat. You could have played them all, and then your pacing would have been better because we would have spent 10 minutes here and 10 minutes here and 10 minutes here.
I think the book became a crutch, and as a writing tool, it wound up doing them a disservice. I think you're right. It would have been better just to go, like, open with one of the stories and then just go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just make it a strange town. All you need is like a new family to move in and then be like, how bizarre.
What is happening?
And then they can just leave at the end or stick around and we can solve these puzzles.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's also funny. This is a movie, which I think is what people want, but we are also in kind of the golden age of TV. Why not make this just an anthology on Netflix?
I'm so confused as to why, like, you could do, because Netflix doesn't I'll force you to have a time frame. Your shows can be 15 minutes. Like the Comedians with Cars, some of them are 18 minutes, some of them are 45.
Love, Death, and Robots has 30-minute episodes, 2-minute episodes.
You could legit take each story, like the first book, and probably split it up because it's 29 stories per book. But like first season, you could literally come out with 6 seasons. Your first season is 13 episodes, and you're taking each story and doing a 10-minute to 12-minute story for it. That would come off much better than what we got as this.
And the thing about Netflix is they're canceling shows left and
right.
They
need product.
If you just start a show and go, it's going to be 6 seasons, they'll be like, cool. Because 9 times out of 10, once we stop getting the subscribers for it, you're out anyways.
Right.
So it almost makes more sense for them to start cranking out miniseries.
Right, just doing these small shows. Yeah, that's a much better... I know they didn't want to do it anthology way, but I feel like the anthology way, like from the Tales in the Hood movies or the Tales from the Crypt flick, like they're telling an anthology story.
I think it's just a big risk. I could see a lot of studios, especially CBS Films. This is their second to last theatrical movie before they're part of Paramount.
Yeah,
I'm sure that somebody there was like, don't even risk.
Yeah.
You'd think if you only had 2 more left, you'd be like, let's go
balls
crazy.
Out.
Yeah. You've got Del Toro and a property that people have been kind of jonesing for. Like this was the right combination. I think they just got bogged down in this kind of weird, like we now do live in this era where because of Stranger Things and everything has to have this gloss where all the hair is the same and we're all wearing Letterman jackets.
The 60s to 80s sheen of like...
The kids all have to be like Goonies adventurers and there's going to be a bully.
We got to ride a bike at some point in this movie.
By the way, goes from being sober as a judge to drunk in every other scene.
Someone did not watch the dailies to say, yo, can you make a choice? Because you're drunk as hell here and you're talking perfectly fine in this very next scene, which when stitched together are literally 30 seconds apart from each other.
Right. Even in the same scene, he's threatening them with a bat. And then when the guy at the drive-in is like, sir, come this way. He's like, where am I going? I'll just follow you because I'm very drunk. And it's like, well, you also were driving the car fine.
Yeah.
And
when he shows up to the house with his mom's like, "You're supposed to take these eggs. Are you drunk?" He's like, "I'm fine."
These eggs
like, you just
12
drove a car perfectly fine. You got here.
Deliver the midnight eggs. Surely they're awake. Oh, what a just.
It's funny because I know Guillermo wrote and produced, but he didn't direct. But I feel like even if he directed, this would have still been the same outcome. I just don't. I don't think the way that he approached this film as a screenwriter helped this movie at all.
No, it didn't. You're throwing in these like generic, if you want to be a writer, you got to move to the big city. We can't even say a real city.
No, the big city.
Just the big one.
Big city.
Which one? Like, we don't know I don't think we know what state they're in.
No.
Just in the Midwest.
I tell you, I said it off my eyes rolling in the back of my head. I almost got up when they did the whole tropes. Like, we don't read the book reads us. I was like, fuck you. I'm out. Yeah. I am done here.
Oh, of course it does. Except it doesn't, because these are random stories. Really, it's just that Sarah Bellow has a chip on her shoulder.
She's really pissed about some stuff because this pale lady, no story was being written, and this kid is still gone.
Yeah, it's funny. This is now the second episode in a row where I'm like, man, if you just cut off the adaptation or spin-off side of it, and we're like, it's an original story about a book, it would still be very unoriginal and uninspired.
Correct.
And if you're going to be unoriginal and uninspired, at least do your property justice.
Yeah.
If you're going to be based off of something and then feed in originality like you're some sort of scientist, like, do it well.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm wrong, though, because the movie made money.
It did. Was it number 2?
Number 2, right behind Hobbs and Shaw. Hobbs and Shaw this weekend brought in 25 mil. Scary Stories brought in 20.8.
That's a
Dora
lot.
Brought in 17.
That's not bad for Dora.
And it's fine.
The kitchen made nothing.
The kitchen made nothing. This is also proving us wrong. The highest opening for a horror movie this year.
Yeah, and it's weird. They got an 80% Rotten Tomato score and a 72% fan, and I think they have a C Cinema score. Cinema score is always weird because horror movies always score pretty in the middle of the road, no matter if they're good or bad. Horror just doesn't do well on the Cinema score ranking for whatever reason. But for you to have an 80% Rotten Tomato score, I don't know what the hell they saw that I
mean, the movie isn't terrible. I think it's just frustrating. And I think if you look at it from the viewpoint of just the art direction and just the stories, and then kind of go, the connecting tissue is for kids.
Yeah.
You walk out giving this a 75%.
Yeah.
If you dig a little deeper, it's just kind of pointless.
Meandering.
And this ending that we're now going to go find them, like they're locked in the Upside Down in Stranger Things, was another like, okay, like, so where are they? We don't know. Let's assume that this is going to be a franchise forever.
That's the way that's the way this movie ends. And I mean, they did well enough. However, now with CBS Films being basically absorbed, Paramount's going to be like, no.
I don't know. It beat Paramount's movie this week.
That's true.
So that's true.
That's the one that they will go in and be like, well, you beat us. So maybe this is something that we can look into and further like take the wheels off and see what we got.
I just think people did really underestimate the longevity of this series from when it came out. There was an article on Deadline today where the writer was astounded that this property was like hipper than Dora. And I immediately
don't see how that's
was like
confusing.
Of course it is.
Right.
More people know about it.
Yeah.
A broader audience.
I was going to say Dora was very focused on one audience.
Dora is also a long walk. Even if you're, because it's a preschool show,
right?
She was a child,
correct.
Now you want me to watch this Jumanji, Indiana Jones light movie that it would be like if SpongeBob made a Mission Impossible film.
Yeah,
and I'd be like, but why?
But why? This isn't. Who's this for? Whereas I feel like Scary Stories has a better idea of who their audience is.
Well, they were both, targeting.
The same audience.
It's going to sound dumb. I was going to say underage girls.
It is. They're both targeting that same audience. When
young
you have
girls.
Scary Stories is leading with a young girl.
With a Latinx protagonist.
Correct.
So it is kind of going after similar markets. Yeah. But, I mean, we know historically that specific audience will go to horror movies
before
more than anybody
else. Like that audience is a horror
13
audience.
to 24-year-olds,
correct,
females, they're going to the horror movie
before
the adventure movie.
Right.
We know that.
Yeah.
I do also think that Scary Stories has been a part of like the generation, the 80s, the 90s. I can only assume that kids in the thousands also read it.
Doors was only one generation.
Yeah.
And then it went away for a while. And now it's all trying to come back. It sucks. I also think Dora suffers from having an entire Latin Hispanic cast. Like, I think not having anyone else, unfortunately, in this day and age, doesn't draw in people that don't look like them.
Right. And it plays down. It's like you said, we just don't know what the age is. Like,
yeah.
Because it's not a Tomb Raider movie or anything else.
Like, I couldn't get a read on the trailers. Like, one trailer, I was like, oh, this is cool. And the second trailer came out, I was like, oh, this is for kids. I'm no longer sure who this is for.
Yeah, but we'll see. I mean, now we're kind of
in the
running
slums
out
of August. Like,
yeah,
there's nothing.
I mean, To me, it's Good Boys and we're done.
And Ready or Not.
I do want to see Ready or Not.
I think Ready or Not is going to do well.
I think those are two audiences that won't put a dent in Scary Stories. This could end up making quite a good deal.
Well, that's why I think both Scary Stories and Hobbs and Shaw are lucky in placement. Like I think they're going to have some legs because there's nothing really that attacks it so much.
And Disney is still Toy Story 4 is still out, Spider-Man is still out, Lion King is still out. It's an oddly crowded. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is still out, which isn't Disney, and it also isn't a remake.
That's true.
So there you go. Originality can win sometimes, guys. Not all the time.
No.
As we learned when Brian Banks and The Art of Racing in the Rain also fell apart.
Which is a movie that I think people should be seeing, because that's a great story, but it's a very small niche thing.
Like next weekend, the weekend after we're recording this, the 14th, is just Angry Birds 2. That won't do anything.
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
47 Meters Down and Blinded by the Light won't do anything.
No.
Good Boys will make its money, but it'll won't attack this.
No.
Ready or Not won't attack this. Really, there's not much to challenge it until It 2, and that's going to be a hard R.
It is a hard R.
And it's also going to have kids who look like these kids.
Yeah.
But now they're adults.
But now they have adult versions of them. Yeah.
So it's different, kind of.
It's all fine.
I don't know. Do you have anything else to say about these movies?
No. I do hope that, even though this is done well and is going to continue to do well, I feel like at the box office, I do hope that it's somewhere down the line in 5 to 10 years, we get a proper anthology-styled story on one of these streaming services, because I feel like that's a better way to tell these stories.
Isn't that kind of the bummer when something comes out that you're like, oh, I really want this, but it wasn't the way I wanted it, is now...
And now we have to wait 5 years.
Wait an it's almost like when the...
No, I'm saying 5 years because I think things are speeding up, but that's not the actual
No, we
number.
might just make these movies for 20 years.
Correct.
It's like, oh, we gotta wait.
Yeah.
It's always a shame. I always hate that. That's how I feel about a lot of video game movies. I'm like, well, now I gotta wait for him to try this again when I'm 50.
Correct. Like I sit here with like some of these X-Men movies or like the new Men in Black, and I'm like, this would have been better if we had done this way. But now I have to wait for a decade.
Or they can make new movies.
Or something, yeah.
They won't do.
You're silly.
They will never. This is it. We're in it now. Like, it's just gonna be the same old thing. So keep listening to our podcast about that. And leave us a review on iTunes, and then follow us on Twitter and Facebook at HollywoodADI and Facebook.com/group/Hollywood already did it. And we will see you next week.
Later.